very warm good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Evening Review Show. It's, of course, the second show for the year, the third show, rather. And, of course, issues of national interest continue to take center stage. And today we look into the current squabbles playing out at the National Youth Council, a very important body as far as youth empowerment is concerned. We're joined in studio tonight by Mr. Kwekwe Kadhapwa. He's the spokesperson of SWANU of Namibia, an affiliate of the NYC. Mr. Kadhapwa, good evening and welcome to the Evening Review.
Good evening to you, sir, and I'm very glad that you have him here today.
Indeed, thank you very much. Of course, let's start off this conversation perhaps just by gauging as to how we got where we are as far as the operations and the governance affairs of the NYC is concerned. It's court cases, it's fights between affiliates, it's fight between the leadership, the executive leadership of the NYC. How did things get out of hand without anyone stepping in to remedy the situation?
I would not want to take you guys too far back, but let me start here. We went to a representative council meeting sometime last year. And it was at this meeting that we have taken a few resolutions as representative council. Now, the representative council is a body that is part of the National Youth Council. It is, in fact, the highest policy decision-making body of the council in the absence of the General Assembly. Now, at this meeting, we had resolved a few issues. Amongst others was the issue of restructuring guidelines. Now, the restructuring guidelines are used for the constituencies and the regional youth forums to restructure their respective constituencies and forums. After we have resolved that the board should take these resolutions and perhaps amend the guidelines that are in place and forward them to the minister for approval, we adjourned the meeting. The board did as instructed. They took these resolutions, they visited a few old guidelines, they made the necessary amendments, and then they forwarded this to the minister for approval. The minister approved these guidelines, and these guidelines then gave birth to the restructuring process. A few days down the restructuring process, or after the restructuring process was almost completed, a few affiliates, I believe 5 of the 52 or 53 affiliates that are affiliated to the National Youth Council, aired grievances with regards to the way the restructuring guidelines were adopted. Some claimed that the restructuring guidelines ought to have came back to the representative council meeting, for the representative council meeting to approve them before the minister can perhaps make them law. However, that was not the position. In fact, our National Youth Council Act is clear with regards as to how the policies and the restructuring guidelines or any other legislations is to be made law. The Section 48 provides for that. So after they've aired these grievances, the minister wrote to the representative council, to the board, to call for a special representative council meeting to address these grievances, as our act provides that the representative council meeting has the power or has the function to perhaps look into grievances that are aired by other affiliates. A special representative council meeting was called. We convened in Crossbarman, I believe, on state resources. We took resolutions. Amongst other resolutions, we also addressed the issue of grievances. Fortunately, there was a restructuring committee that was established, and among its members were also members from the ministry. They were represented, and this restructuring committee gave us a report. They also brought these grievances to us. We addressed their grievances as per the instructions of the minister, and we made proposals. And with the report we got from the restructuring committee, we gave our opinions and then our input and perhaps resolutions as to how the matter can be tackled going further. We sent this back to the board. The board, as per the instructions of the minister, gave back this report to the minister. After the minister receiving this, we were to go to General Assembly, I believe 2 weeks after the Special Representative Council. I believe that was around the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Before we could go to the General Assembly, the minister then perhaps gave another directive to the board to halt the General Assembly. That is where the bone of contention started now.
Yeah.
Because as far as I'm concerned, or as far as the Act provides, the minister has no powers that goes beyond as stopping a General Assembly. So the board perhaps looked into this issue, and then they I'm aware and I'm reliably informed that they gave a legal opinion to the minister that she does not have the power to go beyond that. The board then gave the legal opinion and wrote back to the minister. The minister was informed. The General Assembly was never called off. We went to the General Assembly, and the eve of traveling to the General Assembly, the minister wrote to the board, and in fact she suspended the board on that very day before we could go to the General Assembly. So the board was suspended. Unfortunately or fortunately, the masses was already on the ground in Rietfontein. Some traveled already Thursday. We traveled to Rietfontein and we had our General Assembly. However, the minister is still she disagrees with this General Assembly having taking place, and after she has suspended these board members, she appointed an interim board. Now, something that I left out on that very eve also, after the board was dismissed, that is the word to use, the board went to court on that very evening, and then they perhaps made an urgent application for the minister's decisions to be put on halt or suspended pending a review application. Unfortunately, we did not get judgment on that very eve, and the matter was postponed to another date. The minister, having appointed an interim board by that time, also appointed an alleged executive chairperson.
Yeah.
Now, we should be aware that within the confines of the National Youth Council Act, the executive chairperson is a political head of our institution. The NYC is not structured that like any other parastatal. We have two kind of governing structures. We have the political governing structure that is headed by the executive chairperson and 5 members of the board that are elected at General Assembly. Now, the executive chairperson can solely only be elected by the General Assembly. They cannot be appointed by the minister. The National Youth Council Act does not make for such provision. The Public Enterprises Act does not even make that provision. The minister has no powers to appoint an executive chairperson. The minister, in her letter to suspend or dismiss the members of the board, quoted that these members were they conducted themselves in a way that is against the National Youth Council Act. They were allegedly accused of misconduct and fraudulent acts. Now, the minister, in her dismissal, dismissed the entire board.
Yeah.
She was not specific as to say, no, these are the members of the board that I'm dismissing. That is one. But funny enough, in the interim board which she established, she appointed a certain Ms. Beverly Silas, with due respect, who was part of the previous board, who are perhaps titled to have acted fraudulently so. Now you wonder at what point in time she has perhaps carried out the investigations, because the Namibian constitution is clear. The minister is an administrative officer. They are bound by the constitution and they are to act fairly and reasonably. And they are perhaps to give a fair opportunity and chance for the colleagues to, an audience, for the colleagues to explain themselves. So here and there, those are the few things that gave rise to the conflict that is within the institution now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since the start of all this, How has it affected the work of the affiliates, if at all? Has there been any effect?
If we look at the intention of the drafters of the, you see, the National Youth Council is an act, is a creature of statute. It is created by the National Youth Council Act. The drafters of that act had the holistic intention of perhaps building an institution for the youth to forward the youth agenda, to perhaps drive the youth vision and perhaps empower the youth. That is what gave birth to youth affiliating themselves to the National Youth Council. Amongst the functions of the council is perhaps to fund or subsidize these affiliates. Now, you would remember that when I spoke about restructuring, I spoke about constituency restructurings. So these affiliates, or they go back to constituency level, and we are aware that money is an issue. So perhaps for the projects to go forth and for individual youth to empower themselves, this agenda should be perhaps driven by the National Youth Council. Now, in the absence of the National Youth Council having a leadership in place, or a recognized leadership in place, or in the midst of us having these squabbles, the affiliates remain unempowered, the individual youth remains unempowered, the youth agenda remains perhaps compassless. It has no direction because we are caught up in these individual fights.
Yeah. Maybe for the benefits of the viewers, what type of assistance would affiliates normally get from the NYC?
The NYC gives a leadership projects or programs that are headed under the programs office of the National Youth Council. I remember that it was at a time headed by Mr. Eleni Hengua. It gives monetary grants to the affiliates for them to move their agenda forward and for them to reach their members at constituency level, at circuit level, say villages and all that. So there are regions who have been empowered with green schemes projects. There are regions who have been empowered with technical instruments, perhaps for individuals who are very handy, perhaps to further their businesses. Yeah, so there are quite various ways in which the institution empowers the youth.
Yeah. Of course, the cry has always existed that there's no one who's really pushing the youth agenda. And of course, that is part of the mandate of the NYC. With all these fights now going on, the youth has always used it as a scapegoat to blame, whether it's what they call in politics the elders and so on, for the misfortunes of the youth. But if young people can't organize themselves and are fighting amongst themselves and forgetting about the youth agenda, who should do it for them? What do you think? What is the ideal remedial action that ought to be taken to solve the situation once and for all?
You see, the society is structured in such a way that each and every organism or each and every person needs the other. The youth cannot drive an agenda without the elders, because the elders have came before us. They perhaps can provide guidance to 2 or 3 things. And the elders as well cannot drive the agenda of the country without the youth, because they are the majority and they are the ones with the power, so to say. But in the case of the National Youth Council, I would not blame the youth too much. Because, you see, this fight has elevated and has moved away from the very structures of the National Youth Council and has moved into institutions such as the Ministry of the Youth. The Ministry of the Youth is headed by the Honorable Minister. And I could say, with what is before us now and what is before court, the Honorable Minister is guilty of the misfortunes of the National Youth Council. Not only that, the the scenario in which we find ourselves in today, as to why I say the youth cannot be blamed. The youth has leadership. Leadership is represented in the Representative Council of the National Youth Council. Leadership represents the youth at the stage of the General Assembly. Now, these two structures as bodies of the National Youth Council has convened and provided leadership as to the issues that are perhaps hindering the council. We have given our various opinions to the minister as an individual or as an office. We have given a petition to the Prime Minister. We have laid out in these petitions as to how our institution as the youth should be governed, and as to how we can move out of this complex. We have provided these things to the elders. It is clear. So really, in this event, I don't know whether this is the correct way to say it. I would want to shift the blame and say the youth is not at fault at this level, but the elders or the minister who is an elder, who is heading the institution and who happens to bring us to this very scenario we find ourselves in, is to blame.
So you mentioned that you've petitioned the minister and so on. What has their response been to your concerns that you've raised in those petitions? What was their reaction?
We have petitioned the minister since time immemorial. We have written to the minister on various occasions. I remember when we were in Swakopmund, it was around COVID, we were informed as leadership that the director of council, by then, with respect, Madam Kalista was operating without a valid contract. Once we became aware of this, we petitioned and we wrote to the minister to perhaps step in and help us with this. There were other issues around governance in the institution, which we also wrote to the minister, and she never responded. Today, a few years, I believe that was 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we wrote to the minister. The minister, in fact, wrote to us airing the grievances that were brought by affiliates who are part of leadership. And we wrote to her as to how she is to address those issues. She has not responded to us. What she has did is dismiss a board that was legitimately elected. So I would say that we have really tried to perhaps communicate our grievances and our problems to the minister. But she does not respond, if I should put it, because I have been part of the Representative Council, which convenes at least twice a year for the past 3-4 years now, and I have not received a solid response from the minister. We have lately petitioned to the Prime Minister. I believe that was 2 or 3 weeks ago. We have not received a response in that regard yet, but we are faithful that perhaps they will provide leadership.
It's easy to shift the blame, to say that it's not the doing of the youth, but rather the minister who seemingly, according to you, doesn't want to listen to your input as young people. But one can also argue that, is it really fair to think that the minister would want such an important institution to be in shambles? For her to deliberately do something that will jeopardize the institution?
They say in English, action speaks louder than words. The minister who is, by virtue of her office, the custodian of the youth, if she has been advised, variously so, on numerous occasions, on the issues around the NYC and the issues that bring the institution into squambles, and if the custodian of the youth has been advised as to how she is to tackle these issues, and she has refused to heed to that advice, I would confidently say that then she is perhaps intentional in doing or causing the squambles that are amongst the institution.
Yeah.
Yes.
if we have to, something that's also interlinked in this, the issue of the squabbles within the youth ministry as far as the NYC is concerned. Not so long ago, we saw media reports of the minister writing to her ED in the same ministry on this NYC matter, saying that you are doing things without my blessings. And they are seemingly on opposite sides. How is that affecting the NYC as well?
You see, we found ourselves in a very unfortunate situation. That is one. Two, I really cannot comment on the matters which are within the youth ministry. But we should be aware that the minister has her powers, which extend until a certain point, and so does the executive director. The executive director is the accounting officer of the ministry. And if her directives fall within the scope and the confines of her powers, then so be it. But if it is not within the scope of her powers, then it warrants perhaps the attention of the minister. So I unfortunately cannot comment in those issues. Yeah.
Look, you did mention that there's this sentiment that the minister overstepped as far as the board issues of the NYC is concerned. There's this school of thought that at the gathering at Rietfontein, a substantive board was elected there, and an interim board was subsequently instituted by the minister. So in terms of reconciling the two, to ensure that there's proper oversight that should be exercised by the board, how are affairs currently playing out?
As it is currently now, the board that was elected at the General Assembly in Rietfontein has not been appointed by the minister. The board that was elected by over 200 youths that gathered there, whom are part of the 53 affiliates of the National Youth Council and regional youth forums, has not been put into operation. Now, the interim board that was perhaps appointed by the minister, I'm aware is the one running the affairs at the institution as we speak. The youth protested some time back and perhaps asked that Ms. Beverly Silas and the interim board exceeds the National Youth Council offices and building because they were not duly authorized to be there in terms of the act. However, that protest led to the petition, and as law-abiding youth, we have perhaps taken a backstage position on that issue, perhaps awaiting the outcome of the court to pronounce itself. But the unfortunate thing is that the same interim board, whom we say is illegally in office, has, as of yesterday, made decisions so far as suspending managers within the National Youth Council. These suspended managers have aired grievances against the former director, Ms. Calista. And something that perhaps we should also put on record is that there was an investigation that was carried out between the Public Enterprises Office in conjunction with the Ministry of Youth with regards to the grievances and the misconducts that were alleged against Mrs. Calista. This report has not been given to the Representative Council. One, it was not presented at the General Assembly. We are informed that this report has been completed, and if not so, is pending. But this report is elevated to the perhaps the level of the ministry or the ministers. But today we find that an interim board has suspended managers who have aired grievances against a director that he is already suspended, claiming that they would perhaps interfere with investigations.
Yeah.
You wonder what investigations it is, if the investigations are already being carried out or have been being carried out, and why it is prudent now to suspend them now. So I would say that the affairs now are playing in the advantage of the interim board, illegally so, but unfortunately that is the position we find ourselves in. They say the arm of law is long.
Yeah.
It takes time to get there, but fortunately it gets there when the time is right. So we are in the hands of our judiciary.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Kadapa, we'll head for a short break and we'll be back to continue this conversation.
Thank you.
Okay.
African Child Development Trust presents the annual ACE, an exclusive fundraising golf day in support of the ACDT Education Project. Join us on 21st February at the Windhoek Golf Club for this prestigious event. Register your team now on eticket.onmy.na for only 5,000 Namibian dollars per team. Your registration includes a branded golf shirt and cap, a golf cart for the day, welcome breakfast and post-play snacks, 9 on-course activations, and amazing prizes for the top 5 teams. Don't miss out. Register your team today and put for progress at the annual ACE. Together, let's drive change and support education with every swing.
Well, there you've heard it from Mr. Kadapa, all the affairs taking place at the NYC and the way forward and what should be done to ensure that the institution returns to normalcy. Well, that's it from us at the Evening Review team. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a pleasant evening.